Hi. That's my daughter, by the way. I'm very proud of her. And without her, I'd just like to say that tonight's event would not be what it is, because she did a lot of work in helping us get it done. So everyone will hang out. Honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. It's really good to see you here. And taking the trouble to come from wherever you've come. I've travelled some long distances, stuck no doubt on the M25. So you're here, and tonight is the night that we've been working towards quite a long time, and it's really good to see you all again, in many cases after a long, long time. So this is really an occasion for us to celebrate, and I think that we're really sort of celebrating the successes that we've all had in our own way of getting into the UK by choice or destiny, or however we really consider it to be, and for the way that our lives have changed and been blessed and transformed. And I'd like to share a little story, I think, about the beginnings of Job Connections, of how it all started for us, which quite a few people have asked me about, and I thought it was about time we sort of shared it with us. Job Connections started in Lusaka, Zambia in 1996. It was a business that my wife, Chili, at that time we were not married, I don't think. I don't think we were married then, but anyway, we started a business called Job Connections, and at that time we were providing regular HR and recruitment services to a lot of new incoming businesses after the multi-party politics of Zambia took over from the sort of single presidencies of Kaunda. A lot of changes occurred. Money was liberalized, the economy changed, and a lot of investors were coming into Zambia from not just South Africa, from the UK, and we provided a lot of recruitment services to those companies. We have people like ShopRite, that you're probably very familiar with. We did a lot of work with them. Woolworths, who was first started in Manda Hill. Zamcell, who I think you probably know now as Airtel. And we really had a thriving little business providing local Zambians into new up-and-coming businesses. And we worked there, I think, for about 4 years. I had a separate business. I was working, I had a company there, Shared. Some of you may know it was called Tradco Zambia. We were importing and distributing medical goods. And I had contact with a lot of hospitals. And it was the contact with the hospitals that I had up in the Copperbelt and throughout actually Zambia that opened up connections to the nursing community. So 4 years later, in 2000, when we left the UK and came back from Zambia to England, and Mumba started her education, we were at a big question mark in our lives. What are we going to do? And we heard that England needed nurses. We thought, well, that's the point. We've got a recruitment company in Zambia, and we've got, access to quite a lot of these things. Let's start a business. And Job Connections UK was formed on the back of Job Connections Limited from Zambia. And actually, initially, we were a liaison office. We were a very small little liaison office representing our Zambian office in the UK. And after some very good telemarketing from Chile, she met a guy on the telephone by the name, I think, of Greg Swires, who was a Barchester manager somewhere, I think, in a Reigate or South London home. And we were saying, well, who does your overseas recruitment? And he said, well, you must speak to Leslie Flory. We said, oh, okay, we'll follow that lead up. And sure enough, we made a phone call to Leslie Flory, who at that time was the manager of Southern Down Nursing Home in Chipping Norton, and she was also heading up the international recruitment, which was a division that I think that she just started on. And after a very long conversation on the phone with Leslie, we managed to get an appointment to come and see her, armed with a box of CVs. We had this huge, great big box of CVs and thought, oh my God, there's 55 CVs here. Surely to God, Leslie's going to find some which she'll take. And we had a very interesting time with Leslie. We got on very well, and we left her this big box and said, well, go through them in your own time and tell me all the nurses here that you like, and we'll start to do the work for you. After 2 or 3 days, or I can't remember, maybe a week, she said, Jamie, I found one. Oh, I thought, my God, one, that's a bit short, isn't it? And that was a Rose Ramadani, who we actually tried to get here, but she couldn't make it. Rose was the first nurse that was identified amongst this pile. And just to give you some background, we knew nothing about nurse recruitment. Absolutely zero. We didn't know about work permits, we didn't know about immigration, we didn't know, all we knew was that people wanted nurses. And so that's how our business started. And it took us about 3 or 4 months with Leslie coaching us on how to fill out a work permit, sending us samples of this is what you do. And in those days, UKVA were very, very easy. There was no fee, there was no money, there was no registration, there was no OISC. It was just fill out a form and send it off. And out came the work permit. And after about 3 or 4 months, Rose's work permit arrived, and we went, woohoo! This is good. We're off the ground, you know. And that was in March 2002, if I'm not mistaken. It took us about 3 or 4 months to get to this point where she not only got a work permit, but she arrived into the country. And during that time, we were educating ourselves on this whole thing called NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council. There was a thing called adaptation or supervised practice. There was a whole sort of learning curve that we started to get ourselves really involved with. And I think around about May 2002, we started to get our first ONP nurses over to work with Barchester to undergo the supervised practice with Northampton University and Dr. Tricia James. And that year, we started with ONP nurses, and there may be some of you here who came in on that batch. There are, yes. And at the same time, there was this sort of different background whisper going on about senior carers. Now, senior carers was a term that was completely foreign to us. It had no NMC registration, and it didn't require you to be a nurse to come and work. And this opened up the door to all the enrolled nurses from Zambia, who otherwise had been previously excluded from any possibilities coming into work in the UK. And that's when the senior carer recruitment process started. And it went from 2002 towards the end. I think the first lot started to come through. And there's a lot of you here who came in as enrolled nurses and who have since settled and undergone further UK training, become yourselves registered nurses, and brought your families up. And this is one of the things that we're really celebrating today, the successes that you've all had as a result of being able to come in. So that's, and then really I think what happened was that having opened up this sort of door, Barchester, by the way, at that time, was, I think, probably a group that had 14 nursing homes, I think, more or less. And as fast as we were bringing people in, they were being gobbled up, and we were thinking, where are they all going? You know? Because 14 homes became 16 homes, became 18 homes, became 23 homes, and they were just growing and growing and growing, and we were shoveling in people, you know. And we said, well, we've got to find other markets. And so we went to Romania, Bulgaria, and we've got here, I'd like to welcome Borislava and her husband Michael, who helped us recruit a lot of Bulgarian nurses. And sorry to say that a lot of them couldn't come tonight. We went to Romania, we went to Philippines, we went to China, we went to Poland. We were scouring high and low to feed this monster machine that was gobbling up people. 20, 30 people a month were being ported. You know, it was just, and Barchester was growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And I think the thing that I could really say was that it provided a huge opportunity for me, and Leslie and I travelled around a lot of these countries, and we had the privilege of being able to meet a lot of you, seeing different cultures, seeing different people, seeing different ways that the world ticked, and recruited a huge selection of people who many of you here have excelled. And I must just tell you, one of the things about China that really struck us was that, you know, we went to Beijing, we went to Shanghai, we went down to a place called Heaven on Earth, which is a beautiful Chinese city. We went up to Harbin in the north, and we had the privilege of being able to see the, what they call the terracotta soldiers in Xi'an, which was just, you know, completely awesome and amazing. So we had a huge cultural exposure to different cultures that I personally found very enriching. And the other thing, and there aren't any Chinese here, so I'll say it, was that we were invited to have a meal. We got off the plane, we'd flown in from British Airways, we landed in Beijing in God knows time. It was a huge, long, 14-hour flight or something horrendous. We were tired. We were whisked off by some black car with the dugged out windows and taken to a restaurant. And the restaurant was, it turned out, a very, very well-known Chinese restaurant. Well, obviously Chinese, it was in Beijing. But we didn't know that when you leave your plate empty, it means that you're not full. And so we ate with relish the first couple of dishes, which was the same thing, and then we kept on being given more, and we kept on being given more, because like good English people, we ate it all up, and we put our knives and forks on the table, and then some more food arrived. And this went on and on and on, and little did we know that we had about 5 or 6 more courses ahead of us. So by the time 5 o'clock came, this thing went on for hours. We were sort of like trying to falling asleep at the table, and we were absolutely full. And it was a point that we then learned next time to be a little bit more reserved. So anyway, enough of that. Thank you all again for coming here. It's really been great to see you, and we hope that tonight will be a time where you can sit down and speak to friends and colleagues that you haven't seen for a while. Certainly I want to move around and say hi and get to know you a little bit better, and to really share this evening some of your success stories. And we've got slideshows and various things happening that I think are not we've tried to put together what we can. We searched photographs, and we've tried to get interviews done, and we will be going around individually on the table with Dave here, a friend of ours, who's got a camera, who'll be recording little things, and we want to try and capture tonight some of your own personal little stories. So do feel free to speak to Dave about your stories. We want to capture these because we think they're valuable. I think it's something we'd like to share. So thank you very much.